employers have a lot of information about their participants, right? 25 years ago, all the information was on spreadsheets and difficult to cull and analyze and segregate and that sort of thing. That's not the case anymore.
Yes.
And so employers have a lot of information. And the question is, can they use that additional information, and should they, in ways that will benefit their participants?
Welcome to the Tao of Chao podcast, where we will try to find balance and provide a clearer path forward in this uncertain world. Katrina Berishaj advises financial services clients, including banks, trust companies, broker-dealers, investment advisors, insurance companies, and institutional investors on issues arising under the fiduciary and prohibitive transaction rules of the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, also known as ERISA, and the Internal Revenue Code, with respect to financial products, services, and transactions. She assists corporate and governmental retirement plan sponsors on a broad range of issues concerning their fiduciary and non-fiduciary responsibilities. Katrina also advises on qualified and non-qualified retirement plans and executive and equity compensation arrangements. She is the chair of ERISA and Employee Benefits at her firm. She earned her bachelor's degree with distinction from University of Michigan and her JD from Georgetown University Law Center. And here is Katrina. Katrina, thank you for joining me on this podcast. It's great to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Philip. Great to be here.
I know you are really busy, and I got this news blast, headline news, that you have a new position in your firm. Tell me about the title and your firm so that we celebrate together.
Yeah, so I am the chair of the ERISA and Employee Benefits practice at Stradley Ronon, Stevens & Young. Stradley is a 100-year-old law firm that is based in Philadelphia. We have a litigation practice, a corporate practice where we do a lot with mergers and acquisitions. And we also have a global investment management practice.
Wow.
Where we very much counsel financial institutions all over the world.
Terrific. Well, we should call you Madam Chair, so we'll start with that. It's a big job because it's very important. And what we're going to talk about really is focus on your practice in that area. We met, of course, I think earlier this year. I was in your audience. I was very impressed with the way that you explained your thoughts on a number of things. But certainly, at the end of the day, I think both of us agree that the role of fiduciary is so vital. It's if we serve correctly under either set of directions, either in the SEC, which is a lighter version than the ERISA version. It is under that sort of framework that I like to sort of learn from you how you think about really the state of the industry, if you would, first. Sort of what do you think? You think that we are really improving over the last 5, 10, 20 years, where we were, where we are, and then maybe we can project forward and where we should be going. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Everything, right, is a work in progress, right?
Right.
And so we're always tweaking products, services, and in order to meet the needs of the market, right? We're facing what really is kind of retirement insecurity in this country. We are seeing rising healthcare costs. We're seeing increased lifespans, potential for a lack of Social Security, and insufficient savings, right, for retirement. And perhaps most importantly, the shift from defined benefit plans to defined contribution plans, where participants are tasked with saving and investing for their own retirement. And so with this in mind, I think we've seen advancements towards products and services that better suit individual participants, right? Mm-hmm. And, when we look at QDIAs, for example, can be a balanced fund. It could be what is most common today, target date fund, or it could be a managed account.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, a target date fund has one data point, right? And that is retirement age, right? And that's not going to be the same for everyone. So we have kind of a one size fits all solution.
Yeah.
And one size fits all solutions really don't work, right? When we're facing a serious crisis, right? Everyone has different circumstances and different goals. And so what we've seen in the industry is more of a proliferation of personalized and individualized solutions, right? Managed accounts have been around for a while, but what we're seeing is more of an ability to take in certain data points that just hasn't been around, right, in the past. And not only that, but even within target date funds, we're seeing the inability for a plan to have multiple glide paths, right, even within a vintage. So we're seeing advancements in more personalization, more customization, and more options for participants to select investments and have the opportunity to do what's best for them, right? And what meets their end goals and helps them get ready for retirement readiness. So we're seeing a lot of advancement in that way. And that's good, right? That's always a good thing. Personalization and the ability to put in more and better data to get a better outcome is always a good thing. And so I think as a general matter, the industry is on the right path to solve this retirement crisis.
No, I totally agree. But everything really starts with saving more. We can do all the magic wand things.
Yep.
But if you only have $3 to deal with, it doesn't matter anymore. So I totally agree with you. I think this under saving and perhaps under investing, perhaps behavioral biases, all that, and the lack of rebalancing, all those things that we already know are not being exercised or being focused on. And so your point about you under QDIA, which is a qualified default investment alternative, where it provides fiduciary protection, obviously from liability if you prudently select it and prudently monitor. It's really the go-to answer, I think. Right. So basically, I think last 2-3 decades they continue to talk about let's educate everybody, make them invest like a professional. If I may use the dirty word fail, it basically failed. I mean, they're barely good savers. Trying to make everybody professional investors, it's a silly task. I think using your thought on QDIA as a way to once people save and then invest for them, and then to invest for them not with the single factor, but to try to be more personalized, just seems to be intuitively sensible.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a strong proponent of, better data, more data leads to better outcomes. I think that's absolutely the case. I guess the alternative or the other way to say it is garbage in, garbage out, right? That's the opposite.
Exactly.
And so better data, more data, it will ultimately, hopefully, lead to better outcomes for participants.
Yes.
And so I think the solutions are coming more online to help with that.
So with that said, we could in this hyper technology advancement age, I call it hyper. Maybe five years from now, it's like that wasn't hyper. Now it's really hyper. That there are ways that we can get all kinds of data. And yet, of course, government and regulation comes in and say, well, hold on for a second. You just can't go get data. You need to have permission and so on. So there is a struggle between doing the right thing and cook for you to eat with the nutrition that we think it's right for you without you having to deal with cooking and buying the food. Just let us do it for you. against, well, I don't know if I want you to know everything about me. I don't know if you should know everything about me. And I don't know after you know everything about me, what you're really going to do with all that stuff that you know about me, all that on and on and on. So this struggle between the two almost prevent us to be too personalized on a default basis because of this data issue, vis-a-vis being extra super personalized to really do something for you, like scraping data about your net worth and scraping data about all your other account assets and that type of thing. And all done without you getting involved. Why not getting you involved? I mean, as you know, the history has been pretty clear that people are just not really engaged. I mean, we all live really busy lives. We have so many things going on. And yes, retirement is important, but it's in the distance. And so we tend to not focus a whole bunch. How do you think that we can square that circle? Is it squareable, or round out the square, however you want to say it?
Yeah, absolutely. Philip, you're absolutely right. And just anecdotally, right? I have family members that are extremely well educated. And when I ask them, hey, what's going on in your 401k plan? Most of the time, the answer is, well, my employer has invested me in, right? They think that the employer, right,
Yeah.
is doing the investing. And
Yeah.
by definition, that's just not the case, right?
Yeah, right.
So there is kind of a lack of knowledge and a lack of engagement, right? And that's all, that has been the case. And I think
Yeah.
that will continue to be the case, right? Our attention spans are shortening.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm guilty of that. So that's always been the issue, right? Is participant engagement. To your point, we're all busy. We've all got a lot going on in our lives,
Right.
and there could be, and there has been, an effort to educate more. But if there's no participant engagement, you can't get folks to open up emails or watch podcasts or
Correct.
read a short article. That's always been a barrier, and it will continue to be. So, to your point, what can plan sponsors do? What can plan fiduciaries do
Yeah.
to come up with solutions that do not require participants to actively engage, right?
Right.
Because when you think about it, the ones that are not actively engaged probably need the most help, right?
Yes.
And plan fiduciaries and plan sponsors are often thinking about, and the surveys show, right, that they want to offer products and services that will help their participants
Yeah.
with retirement readiness. And so
Right.
what can we do?
Right.
And how do we tackle that issue? And the fact of the matter is, employers have a lot of information about their participants, right? And they always have. But that information now more than ever is readily accessible.
Yes.
And able to be analyzed in an easier fashion, right? 25 years ago, all the information was on spreadsheets and difficult to cull and analyze and segregate and that sort of thing. That's not the case anymore. And so employers have a lot of information. And the question is, can they use that additional information? And should they use that additional information in ways that will benefit their participants? And I'll just give you an example.
Yeah.
One of my former employers has 3 different retirement plans: 401k, a profit sharing.
So few.
Right, right. A profit sharing plan, which is trustee directed, right? So the participants don't direct their own investments,
Right.
and then a standalone ESOP, right? And there are, as part of the total rewards package, significant amounts of money in each of those plans.
Yeah.
For an average participant that is not financially sophisticated, is not engaged, the assets outside of the 401k are significant. And when you think about retirement readiness, and when you think about asset allocation, and when you think about the holistic financial picture and the goals of an individual, the 2 other plans, apart from the 401k, those are important, right?
Yes. Very.
And employers, I mean, they have that information, right? They have the information about the account balance and the other plans. And so a solution that by default takes into account those outside assets would be really helpful.
Yes.
By contrast, a solution that totally ignores that doesn't give you a real good sense of a participant's current circumstances, right? And so how do you realistically manage well, right? Without knowing that those outside assets are there when really you have that information. The employer has that information. And so that's a key, that right there is just an example of key information that an employer has that could be really, really helpful in managing the assets of a 401k, right? In creating an asset allocation or ongoing management or a portfolio that will help a participant get to retirement and retire well. And so something like that, I think is important. I think employers might have that information, and particularly for employees and plan participants that are not engaged, the ability for a solution to take those outside assets, for example, into consideration and manage a portfolio in light of those is critical. Is very important. It's critical, right? It's like, a participant going to a financial advisor and saying, hey, provide me a financial plan, but I'm not going to tell you about these other significant assets that I have, right? It's incomplete, right, at best, and it's not going to give you the best solution.
So that one of the challenges you have mentioned, the ESOP vis-a-vis the 401k and profit sharing, maybe at two different platforms altogether.
Absolutely.
So there is all this, are they communicating each other? Even if there's a desire, can we communicate on a timely basis? On and on and on. So I think we still have a lot of, although we're quite advanced now from the 1970s till now, I mean, this is like a new world, but we are still lacking a lot of connectivity for something as obvious as what you said. ESOP, in some ways, is for retirement as well, right? And it can be substantial, like you said. And profit sharing can be substantial also. Those are things that I think it's a solvable issue or challenge, but is there leadership? Is there a serious request to do that? And then on top of that, there are different fiduciaries. There's the fiduciary and the ESOP, which may not be the same fiduciary as the retirement plan, and they serve solely in the interest of those who are under them, on and on and on. So for all the goodness that we try to create, we actually end up having barriers. When they created it, they didn't think about all that. And by the time when they thought about it, well, it's a little late, and that's just the way it is. And inertia takes over. As I mentioned, we met January. I heard you spoke about really and I'm paraphrasing it. These are not the words. I don't remember the words, but my impression is that as a fiduciary, as a plan sponsor, possessing the important data and not using it, if such avenues available for the sole interest of participants, seems like I don't want to say imprudent, but seems like insufficient. And it's better practice. I won't use the legal terms because I get myself in trouble. Seems like it's a good idea and good thing to do if you use the data. And I'm not talking about the ESOP data vis-a-vis. I'm just purely thinking within a 401k or 403b or 457, whichever four we want to start with, that it is, one can almost make a case. I'm not suggesting some of the class action suit lawyers should listen to this, that if an employer has the data and not use it to do a better job to personalize for each individual, could almost seem like not doing the job completely. Boy, I'm really looking for words because I don't want to use those big words. Am I saying something that what you're saying in a very sort of common way?
So yeah, fiduciary's obligation, right, is to act in the best interest of the plan participants and beneficiaries, right?
Right.
That's the duty of prudence.
Yeah.
Also has the duty to act loyally and diversify investments and so on and so forth. But speaking on the duty of prudence, yeah, the fiduciary has the duty to act in the best interest of plan participants and beneficiaries.
Right.
And how do you do that if you don't know your plan, right? We're not talking about some theoretical plan that's out there. No, we're talking about the plan that the fiduciary has responsibility to manage.
That's right.
So you have to know your plan. And what does that mean? That's knowing the characteristics of the plan. That's knowing the participants and their behavior. And then you have to act in the best interest, right, of the plan and participants. And so to the extent that you have data, and fiduciaries do, right, they have a lot of data on their participants, the fiduciary should be looking at that data. And the Department of Labor in 2013 guidance on target date funds basically said, hey, in selecting a target date fund, fiduciaries should consider whether their service providers have the ability to create a custom target date fund.
That's right.
A custom target date fund, meaning custom based on the plan participants, right, and the plan demographics. So, it's certainly on the Department of Labor's radar, right? They suggested it in their own guidance. But really, when we talk about, and I'm not sure that we've seen any cases yet saying that, hey, you have this participant data, you acted imprudently because you didn't consider it. But if you are really trying to meet your fiduciary obligation to act prudently and act in the best interest of your plan participants, then you've got this information, use it, right?
So it's a duty of loyalty. It's a duty of loyalty. Loyalty is, first you have to know who you're loyal to, and you need to know something about the person that you're loyal to. And if you have the information about the person you're loyal to, then you should use that information to serve in their best interest. Seems like that makes logical sense, right?
That does.
But the question is, I think there is always this fear of using data. I think it's fear based on erroneous assumption, and not there's a universality to that fear. Anything that's personal, it's not thinking intelligently, just sort of reacting to it. Do you find that to be true on some level, that sponsors are saying, well, I don't know? And
I think there's a hesitation, right? To your point, it's just kind of reactionary, right? There's a hesitation to dive in because there are always obviously cybersecurity issues, participant data issues. Is that a plan asset? Is it not? Right? And courts have opined on that.
We can go on for 3 hours on that
one. Exactly. But at the end of the day, fundamentally, right, what I look at is let's look at the QDIA regulations and what do they say? Because I think they're very helpful in thinking about personalization, right? You have a target date fund, and to the extent that it uses age, that is some level of personalization, right?
Of course.
And exactly, and the QDIA regulations obviously accept that, right? And they sanction it. They also do the same, and they specifically approve of managed accounts, right?
Yeah.
Implicit in that is, hey, there's going to be more data on a participant, right?
That's right. That's right.
So, I think the regulations, if you really kind of look behind them, accept the use of additional data. That sure, maybe a participant can enter themselves, but if we have that data and it's helpful to a participant, and we truly believe that using that data is in the best interest of plan participants and beneficiaries, then absolutely you can use that.
Do it, right.
Target date funds obviously now have a long track record of being kind of the go-to for a QDIA, and there is some safety in numbers, right? If everyone else is doing it, that
can be bad.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone else is doing it, so right.
The lemming factor, if all of them jumping off the hill into the water, well, it can be bad. I just want to do it as well.
Right. There's inertia in that. And anytime a new product comes out or a new service comes out, there is a level of education that needs to be done to get people comfortable with a new product or a new service, right? And that is, at various levels. Typically, a financial advisor will have the end relationship with the plan fiduciaries, right, that are ultimately making the decision, or they may be making the ultimate decision. And so there's a level of education for a new product or service that financial advisors need to be educated first. And then if there's a committee or a plan sponsor that ultimately makes the decision on behalf of a plan, they need to be educated as well, right? So any new product or service is kind of slow on the uptake, particularly in the ERISA space.
Yes.
Because there is a level of education that needs to happen at various levels. So you also have to factor that in.
Yeah. Leadership is, in my opinion, is a component of being a good fiduciary. The fiduciary is a leader. And if I'm going to be your fiduciary, I need to lead and not just to ask you what you want. If you know everything, you don't need a fiduciary. We need fiduciary in area where it's complex, in area that is difficult. And that's why we find expert in that area and let him or her to serve in our best interest without him or her getting a PhD in that area and they can lead themselves. So where am I going with this is that I think that part of the inertia is the institutions themselves and say, well, we are safe knowing what we have. Let not allow new things come in quickly because we have liabilities. It's all about liabilities, and that let's not push our fiduciary advice to get into this new space until we are really comfortable with it. So the education, as you have said nicely, is on the advisor or fiduciary level, but I would say also on the institutions that I don't want to say own the advisors, but they affiliate it with, that they also need to feel comfortable, and that's another hurdle, which is even a bigger hurdle sometimes. So even if the advisor who works for a certain institution says this is a great idea, but the institution that they work with are not ready to say is a good idea. Then on top of that, the plan sponsor may say, "Well, I don't know. Let's hold off for 6 more quarters before we address it again." That kind of thing. Do you see that to be true in your practice? Do you see that as retardant to progress?
I think that has historically been true, right? Where we have seen kind of a loathsomeness to get into a retirement plan, right? To the ultimate two-legged participant, right? Financial institutions have kind of historically taken a step back and said, no, we're not going to allow our financial professionals to advise on participant assets within a retirement account, right? That's historically been the case. We've seen a shift, right? Entirely. And where now financial institutions are allowing their financial advisors to get in, right? To get into the retirement plans. And I think that's part of the holistic approach to financial advice, right? Yeah. How do you help someone meet their financial goals when a significant portion of their assets are in retirement accounts and you can't advise on that, right? And so I think we've seen a very much a shift where now that is becoming more common for financial advisors to tap in and to advise on retirement plan assets of a participant, right?
Yeah.
And so financial institutions have, I think, recognized that for any number of reasons, right? There's a lot of assets in retirement accounts, but also as part and parcel of holistic financial advice, right? Understanding someone and all of their assets and all of their goals, right? Everyone's got different goals. Some people some people will never retire, right? They will work till the day they die, and that is them, right? That's not me.
Understood.
So, as part of that overall relationship, you've got to understand folks' goals and then manage to that. And how do you manage to that if you can't manage a significant portion of assets, which is typically going to be in folks' retirement accounts?
I am a big supporter of managed account from the standpoint that in the purest sense, if managed account costs zero, everybody should have one. But doesn't cost zero. It costs a lot more than zero. And part of it is because it's really require engagement and requires participants to not only engage once, but on an ongoing basis. Some really good managed account, as you know, actually offer advice beyond just asset allocation advice, but true advice. So it costs money to do all that. And my understanding from a number of class action suits, I'm inching into your expertise, so I want to step carefully. It's my understanding that I consider it as an oxymoron to put managed account in default. And the reason I say that is because default, by definition, is people who are not willing or able to make investment decisions for whatever reason. Apparently, that's at least 50% of most companies. And then you put the more expensive solution, which may be an excellent solution. I'm not suggesting it isn't. That requires exactly the opposite. Gets people in trouble. Get fiduciary in trouble, because at the end it's no more than a single factor target date fund because they are not giving any information. Did you agree with that thinking, or what's your thought on? I'm not trying to pin you on saying what is right or wrong. I'm just saying generally, because we can always cite exceptions to the rule, but I think that has been, at least my observation, been a bit of a, I would call, oxymoron.
Yeah, so that allegation was made by plaintiffs' attorneys in a case, and ultimately the court didn't decide on that issue, right? But
Correct.
the allegation was
Yes.
That this managed account was no different, no better, offered nothing more than what a target date fund would do.
Yeah.
And it was more expensive, right? And to your point, the folks that typically will end up in the QDIA and not allocate away from that are the ones that are not engaged, right? So
Correct.
they're paying more for
Correct.
nothing more than what a target date fund would do. So we've seen that allegation out there.
Yeah.
And it's sophisticated. And that lets me know that the plaintiff's attorneys are sophisticated, right, in their thinking.
Yeah,
and
of
so
course.
there is cause for concern, right? But that is the allegation, and that's the battle, right? Is that historically managed accounts have been more expensive, right?
Yeah.
For technology purposes and for good reason, right? It's more than just a target date fund.
Yeah.
It does a lot more. Well, it has the opportunity and the potential to do a lot more.
Yes.
But typically, right, it's going to require participant interaction, right? It's going to require the participant to engage, right, to input their data. And as we've said before, participants are in large part not engaged, right? So as you have said, it's kind of an oxymoron. However, I think what we've seen is with advancements in technology and more creative solutions, are managed accounts that by default take into account more information than age and retirement date,
Yes.
right? And so those can be really helpful, particularly for a plan where your average participant or the majority of participants are not engaged, right? Yeah. And you have information, critical information that could be helpful in managing the account, right? Whether that's outside assets or some other data point where it makes the managed account more valuable, right? And we always think about cost, right? Because there are countless lawsuits on the cost. But what is cost, right? It's not just what you pay. It's not the price. To me, I think about it more as the value. What does this offer?
Absolutely.
And as opposed, compared to something else, what does this offer, and how does it compare from a dollars and cents perspective to another option, right?
The question is that value realizable if one is inactive? That's was the question, right?
Yes.
So I think there is, according to Morningstar, there is a new category. When you think about it, it's like, well, we have single factor target date fund, which we already talked about, although it's a significant improvement from here's 300 investment options. Have a great day. It's like, what? Yep. Which was the old way. If you go to the nonprofit world, is 3,000 opportunities, and it's just overwhelming. The other extreme is manage account, get as engaged as you can, and not only one time, but ongoing. As your information change, you should update it so that we can continue to be responsive to your changing circumstances and to give you the best advice we can, or the prudent advice that we can in allocating portfolio. And so Morningstar came up with a new category called personalized target date, where apparently they are providing a suite of solutions similar to more managed account, but this does not require active involvement. And the way they do it apparently is to use at least 5 data sets. So you talked about age. Instead of age, in the target date fund, very well, there's 2.5 years older than you, 2.5 years younger than you within that cohort of 5 years, male or female, income of any kind, all get into that. Well, it's good that you at least have a 5-year interval, but actually knowing your exact date of birth, it's much more precise. I believe salary, right? If you are making certain amount and I'm making certain amount, we may have totally different expectations and requirement. Your plan assets, or at least we need to know how big is the savings in the plan, and then your contribution. You're only putting 1% away, or you're putting not zero, vis-a-vis whatever you are or I am. And then what is your employer, which to your point earlier about profit sharing or what have you. So at least those factors apparently are personalized, which is significantly better than single factor 5-year thing. Not as good as the managed account, for sure, like outside asset to be more personalized, other things. But I think it's trying to move that needle, as we start talking about earlier, the scraping data of everything about you. We look up everything about you and put that in. It's just creepy, right? Creepy, let alone everything else. Not going creepy, but not going the more expensive, full-blown version.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that through the process of evolution, I think that makes sense to sort of as a QDIA, because you're just still able to satisfy or satiate the fiduciary duty of loyalty better, because you're employing some of the data that's already available on each participant. What's your thought on something like that?
Yeah, that is interesting. That's the first time I've heard of it.
Okay.
So these are just totally off the cuff remarks. I think that really gets to the point that I started out with, right? Which is we're constantly tweaking things, we're constantly evolving, and we're constantly, in the industry, is undergoing an evolution to help folks, right? To help folks get ready for retirement and live through retirement on their savings, right? And so those data points seem to me, basically what a managed account is, right?
Yes, exactly.
You take, in a managed account, we'll obviously go further, but you take those points and you use them in a target date fund, and yeah, that has the potential to be a lot more helpful for participants, right? And so, even among the various products out there, we're seeing an evolution, right? Yep. Something, this target date fund class that you just described to me, again, seems like what I thought a managed account was, in the past, right?
That's right.
So we're going through this period of evolution, and listen, to the extent that a plan fiduciary thinks it's helpful for their participants,
yes.
And can help them save for retirement and get to retirement and get through retirement, it's great, right? This is a very interesting development that I just was not aware of.
That's great. No, because it's fairly new, because the Morningstar had to figure out, well, it smells like one, it acts like one, but it isn't one. So
Right.
let's not call it one, and let's call it something else. So I think personalized target date solution, because it's not a fund, obviously, because it's not a single CUSIP that you can trade, because you're plugging in personalized data. So I thought that was an interesting name for it, personalized target date solution. Let's take one step further than that, because I know we have spoken, or at least touched on in the past, about lifetime income. I mean, that's sort of the new shiny object.
Buzzword.
Right, the new buzzword. And when we talk about lifetime income, immediately people think about insured lifetime income guarantee, but actually I think it's doing a disservice. It really is about, you have a pot of money. How do we make sure that pot of money will be enough? However way you want to think of it. So the way I think of it, and just sort of test this thing with you a little bit. Fast forward for another 3 more years, because I know you want to retire early. So 3 more years from now, you're going to retire, and you have a big basket of money sitting there. Like you said, most of the people's wealth, the average worker's wealth, a lot of it is in retirement plan. And so, what are the risks that you will be taking when you retire? You say, well, there are basically 2 risks. One risk is investment management risk. Am I good enough to manage this money so that 3 years from now, forward, that I will be okay, right? And I think most people will find that challenging. So they will have to find somebody to do that. And then we go back into fiduciary again. Is this someone or groups of someone that we can really trust, that they're not doing not solely in the interest of me, but maybe some significant conflict. And we never know, especially when we are not educated in the industry or all the shenanigans that can go on. So there is some risk. And then on top of that, we have behavioral biases and behavioral risk. So those risks are real. So that's one set of risks. The second set of risks is outliving our income. So I think those are the questions that we should be asking ourselves, not to push towards product or schemes, but really asking, are we comfortable with it? And if we're uncomfortable, how much of uncomfortability is it? I know by the time when I finish talking about this, people are saying, what are you talking about? So we go into this risk management. There are 3 ways of managing any risk, as you know. One is avoid the risk. Well, we cannot avoid the risk. We're going to grow 1 year older next year. So that risk we cannot avoid. So that's out. Number 2, retain the risk, that we will manage it. Well, we just talked about that may be challenging for some people, likely, especially longevity risk. And number 3 is to mutualize that risk with somebody else, which is where insurance company comes in, and how much of that mutualization you want. Do you find that to be a reasonable risk management framework, or do you think of it in different ways?
No, I think that's reasonable, right? And that's a good way to look at it. There's a lot underneath, right?
Yeah,
Of
course.
There's a lot underneath that, right? And the devil's in the detail. And so, it's my belief that as fiduciaries, anytime we're engaging with participants, there's usually a level of education
For sure.
that we need to have with them, right?
For sure.
To your point, a lot of participants don't even know, right? Maybe what an annuity is, yeah. Right? I have a cousin who's 25, an engineer, and was telling me about she was in a meeting with some fellow engineers that were a little bit older than her, and they were talking about their pension benefits, and she said, "What is a pension?" That's it's a real scenario, right?
Your answer is don't worry about it. You don't have one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So right, like these are real questions, right?
Yeah,
and there is a there's a gap in what's
knowledge
out there and exactly and what people know.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
So there is, some education that needs to be done for participants to help them understand what's out there and what can best meet their needs. Right.
A framework, at least offer them a framework to think about.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And so if they have a huge pot of money and they feel comfortable that they're not going, they're not going to spend lavishly, and they've got enough and they won't outlive it and they are fine to retire, then maybe an insurance product isn't in their best interest, right? But there's a level of education that we need to do as fiduciaries to help our plan participants understand their circumstances and what's out there and what can help them.
Yeah.
And what maybe isn't so strong of a product to help them.
So if we think about accumulation, personalization is really important, which we talked about most of today. I think decumulation, personalization is even more important, right? To the extent that we can. And that's the next episode. I think will take us another hour talking about that because there's so much going on, right? I think the problem with the decumulation parts, as far as I can see at the moment, is product is driving the discussion, and it shouldn't be because it's sort of backwards. Here's the solution. Do you want it? Well, hold on for a second. I need to figure out what is it I want first before I find the product. But of course, the product side is very helpful as well in educating, in spending the time and money to make these issues known. So we don't hate them, but we are worried about them. I know those are extreme words. I don't mean to ask you for any consent to any of the words I used. And they are very important players, but we need to know where the line is. And that's the job of a fiduciary, I think.
Yeah, that's where individual participant goals really come in, in their circumstances. And so without an understanding of that, it's hard to meet your fiduciary obligation when you are recommending a product, right? And so inherently there's going to have to be a dialogue,
of
right?
Of course.
And hopefully as part of that process, we're educating participants.
So along the way, if we can personalize, and then as we get closer and closer, beginning to be more engaged, more advice, more education, and to continue to further personalize until decumulation or through this decumulation. Yeah.
Right.
I'm tired of personalization. No, I'm just kidding. No, this is really what's going on in the industry. It's wonderful. I'm being facetious. Really is. That's one reason I really appreciate the way you are thinking, because not everyone is willing to make a stance, which you can define it as a fiduciary stance, or you can find a legal, whatever stance it is, to be just very clearly state. Why would you not want that? Why would that be a bad thing? Right now, of course, there's factors underneath. What do you really mean by personalization, and how do you make it happen? All those are of course important, but the concept, again, the framework is having personalization is probably can demonstrate you're working solely in the interest of your participant with more evidence than just saying I am and not using the available tools, or at least examine the available tools to see if that makes sense for you. I'm trying to be careful because I'm speaking to an attorney.
Yeah, no. And as part of any fiduciary decision-making process, right, we know that there needs to be a prudent process, right? And what does that entail? Right. Whether it's, any DIA, whether it's a QDIA, whatever decision point that a fiduciary has to make,
that's right.
They need to consider the options that are available to them, right? The options that are available to the plan. Do the analysis based on, the planned, demographics, the plan characteristics, what's best for the plan.
Yes.
And, where expert advice is necessary because they're not expert themselves, or is helpful, bring in an expert. Yes. And then make a decision that's in the best interest of the plan.
Totally agree. And that's where I think leadership is important. We need people who can at least lead the conversation and not be afraid. And allow plan sponsor to understand and to educate them.
Absolutely.
Well, Katrina, thank you so much. Almost an hour has gone by. It seems like we just started our conversation. And thank you for your wisdom and your experience to share your thoughts on this matter.
Thanks so much, Philip. I had a wonderful time, and I hope your audience finds this to be helpful.
Well, I am the audience for you, and I have found it very interesting. So thank you very much, and congratulations being the chairwoman. And I appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much.
You can always find more episodes by visiting philipchow.us/podcast, or find us on your favorite podcast app. You can always leave us feedback, ask questions, or request a topic for us to discuss by sending an email to pc@philipchow.us.
Views expressed in the Tao of Chao podcast are individual opinions, and they do not represent the employers of each guest or the firm each guest is associated. Our podcasts are for educational and informational purposes only and should not be deemed or viewed as investment advice or recommendations. Please consult your personal financial advisor, investment expert, or investment fiduciary before taking any actions about your plan and investments.